This is Neal with Graveside Paranormal presents Spirits by the Graveside. Tonight's date is 8/26/21. Tonight's episode is a live episode. We are going to be talking about the Roff House. Is it a possession or is it a spiritual miracle that happened? Ladies and gentlemen, there's many forms of possession that actually happen. And in this case here, it is not something demonic. A lot of people believe that every time you hear the word possession, that you think demons, like The Exorcist. Now, don't get me wrong. I appreciate movies like The Exorcist, the Conjuring movies, but I don't think that's what this subject is about. And in the end, I'm hoping that you decide for yourself, is this a possession or a spiritual miracle? Once again, I'm Neal with Graveside Paranormal presents Spirits by the Graveside. I welcome everyone in here today. We are going to be talking about the Roff House, but for right now, as usual, ladies and gentlemen, grab your favorite drink. Today's mine is Gatorade. Go ahead and pop that top. Take a little sip. Cheers, everyone. God bless. Now let's start out with the news. All right. Now, the paranormal news, usually what we do is we usually get the subjects and this and that from things that are going around the country or the United States. But today's, we are going to just talk about Parapalooza 3. We're only 23 days away from September 18th, as you can see up there. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what Parapalooza 3 is going to be. We're going to have walk-through tours throughout the day. It'll be in groups of 6 to 8 at a time. You are going to start out at the top floor, go ahead and hit the main floor, and then you'll go down into the basement for an Anahata session. Now, just so everybody knows, and so I explain it well enough, what's going to be happening is you are going to receive some equipment. You're going to receive EVPs. When you're on the top floor, we'd appreciate everybody's quiet and respectful to everybody inside the house so that you can get the best EVPs. So you're going to be able to gather the evidence for yourself, and then you're going to head down to the basement where you're going to give the EVP to Steve. And Steve is going to send it to your email. Hey, Steve, tell me a little about that.
So, yeah, we're going to have, like Graveside Paranormal usually does, we have an investigative experience that you're going to join us on. And you're going to be able to use our equipment. You can bring your own equipment, too. But we do have equipment for everybody. We're going to be trying to capture some electronic voice phenomenon. And Neal, later tonight, there's a sneak preview. This is a spoiler. We caught some really cool EVPs when we went to the Roff House. Yes. And we're going to share those with you tonight.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen. So just so that you know, tonight we're going to show evidence of the things that what we caught at the Roff House. Now, just so you know, try to put on headphones. It sometimes does help when you're going to be listening to some of the evidence, especially in the first video. The first video, we're actually getting a girl who is there with us as we're doing the investigation. It's a disembodied voice. Now, it's not a very easy thing to hear, but the EVPs are very clear on this thing. And the things that we got from the Anahata, I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to truly enjoy tonight. This is not all the evidence that we had, because all the other evidence that we do have, we are going to put it together with the overnight stay documentary. And we're going to put that together for the 12 people who are staying for the overnight stay. That is sold out. We cannot give away any more tickets because I want to make sure everybody's comfortable. If I did that, it wouldn't be good comfortable for everybody. But I thank everybody who did buy those 12 tickets. That's awesome. And for the other people who are coming out, it's $10. $10. You can't beat that. You're going to get equipment. You're going to be using EVP. Send it to your email, and we're going to be videotaping throughout the whole day. So
that's right. And our custom build equipment, like the Anahata, which is right behind me right there.
And some of the other cool things is, like on our show tonight, Ghostly Podcast is going to be there. Pat and Rebecca are going to be there doing what they do best, and they're also going to be doing bingo for us. So they're going to be doing out there a lot of fun for us. One of the reasons why I want to do things like a bingo, and we're also going to be doing a piñata, is because we want to bring in a lot of positive energy throughout the day. The more positive energy that we bring in throughout the day, the spirits are more receptive. And if the spirits are more receptive, you get more evidence. And that's what I want to do. So I want to try and make this a really good experience. We are going to have some food out there. for you to go ahead and purchase while you're there. We have some tables out there, so if you want to sit and relax and stuff like that. We're also going to have a speaker. I'm going to be doing some speaking out there. We're also going to have Jack Chavez of Paranormal Chicago out there. He is going to be out there talking about a phenomenon called crawlers. No, that's not Jack. The first picture was Jack, but it's called a phenomenon called crawlers. It'll be a very interesting speaking engagement. He's writing a book at this time about this, and he's letting us go ahead and listen to him a little bit about this and give us a little bit of a pre-thing before his book ever comes out. So thank you, Jack, for coming on there. Now, we're also going to be playing Split the Pot for charity. We're going to be giving half the money to a one-time winner and the other half to the National Kidney Foundation. I always do something with charity. And this one here is National Kidney Foundation, and that's very close to Ghostly Society. So we are going to be doing that. And like I said, we are going to be doing bingos. We are also going to be doing raffles during the day. We're going to be raffling off some equipment as well. So a lot of people are going to be having a lot of fun. Now we're going to have our vendors out there. Now our first vendor who's going to be out there is Sias Jewelry. She's going to be out there doing what she does best. Mr. Jason Streets is going to be doing tarot cards. He's going to be out there. Dream With Me, Nina Cannon, is going to be out there. Mr. Ian Delinsky from Springfield Ghostbusters is going to be out there helping us along, and they're going to be sending the check to the Kidney Foundation for us. They're going to be out there with that mobile right there, that Springfield Ghostbusters van. I believe that's the one that they're going to be doing, not the cartoon one, of course, but they're going to have something like that. So they're going to come out there and have some fun with all the guests out there. We are also going to have Angel Cards by Chris. Angel, she is one of our main people with Graveside Paranormal. You're going to really love the work that she does. There has not been one person who has not walked away without a smile on their face. I guarantee you. Chris is awesome. She is great. And then we have our very own from Moonlight Bean, Carrie Bean. I love Carrie. She's going to be helping us out too. She's going to be selling a lot of her products, ladies and gentlemen. Please go out there and purchase that. Some of the other people, I was not able to get some of their icons. Fashion Pieces is going to be out there. Tina Treasures is going to be out there. CC Handmade is going to be out there. If I did not receive yours, I do apologize, but I just don't have it. So, and one other thing that we're going to be doing, when the sun goes down, we are going to be doing scrying. For those of you who are not familiar with scrying, smoke scrying, we are building a box that we actually already built called a scrying box. And we're going to be filling it up with a whole bunch of fog from the fog machines. And we're going to see if we can call upon spirits to take form inside the scrying box. A little bit about that, Steve?
No, I'm just.
You want me to?
I'm excited. Tell them about it, because this is. I put it together. You gave me the instructions. Right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, in 1988, I met a lady by the name of Anna Kane. This lady named Anna Kane, I'm going to talk more about it. I thought she was a little nutty, and that's fine. But she told me about a story about 4 conjurers in Valparaiso, Indiana, and they called themselves conjurers. And in 1871, they built a thing called a scrying box. And a book from a great-grandmother was given to her. And the way she explains it to me is that the book has the instructions of how to make the scrying box. But whoever signs it off, the next owner of it, is bound to the book. Now, 17 years old. So I'm like, all right, whatever. She says, I have to give this book to somebody. So I said, all right. So I said, just to humor her, I signed my name on it. I took the book. She said, now you're bound to the book. Now, for years upon years, I've had this book. And for some reason, I've always had these dreams about this thing, and it gives the instructions for how to build the box. This box is going to be built on that day, on September 18th. 23 days away, by the way. And we are going to try to do smoke scrying. And there's more to the story, and I'll tell it more on the day of.
Have you ever done smoke scrying before, Neal? I mean,
no, we were supposed to do it last year, but because of the pandemic, we were not able to do that, Steve.
What could possibly go wrong?
I don't want to give it away too much because I don't want to scare too many people.
All right.
Let's just say
they're just going to have to come out and see. We're gonna do it.
Yeah, we're just going to have to see.
All right.
So That's about Parapalooza. But the other thing is, all our tickets are going to be going on sale for all our tours. Sorry, on September 9th, we are going to be having 3 new tours, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be having our original nightlife tour every Friday and Saturday night in the month of October. We have one tomorrow night because we did a couple summertime ones. There are some tickets left. You can go on our Facebook and jump on our Eventbrite there. We are also going to be doing a thing called the Trick or Treat Tour. We are going to be working with Mr. Tim O'Connell. We are going to be working with Kildare Haunted City. We are going to be doing a half and half where it's a haunted tour in the beginning, and then we take you on a ghost tour. Also, we are going to be doing a daytime dead tour with Mr. King of Paranormal Radio, Mr. Robert Trisek, and his partner in crime, Jack Chavez, the one I was telling you about earlier. They're going to be doing our daytime dead tours for us this year. So enough about Graveside Paranormal.
Before you go on to the next thing, if folks want to come out tomorrow night, we have a couple tickets left. Where do they get the tickets, Neal?
Well, like I said, they can go on Facebook and they can link onto our Eventbrite ads that are on there, and that can take you right to Eventbrite. The ticket's only $38. It's a $38 ticket, and it's a 4.5-hour tour. Right. And we make it a lot of fun for you, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to be able to use equipment, and you're going to be filmed, and you're going to be able to be put out the next following Saturday on our YouTube channel of all the evidence that you found. Our tours are very different, and I hope you stay tuned and check out the ones in October. Does that sound good, Steve?
Yep. Thanks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, so let's go on to Parapalooza 3, the Roff House. I want to welcome in Pat and Rebecca of Ghostly Podcast. How's it going, guys?
Hey, how are you? We're so excited to be here.
Very excited.
I am excited to have you guys tonight. I really am. And I'm so excited to have you guys on Parapalooza 3. I reached out to Pat and I asked him, hey, man, do you want to be part of this really cool event? And he was like, hell yeah. He wanted to be part of it right away. And the cool thing is, you guys are going to be out there doing what you're doing best. You're going to do your broadcast, probably taking questions from people and stuff like that, one-on-one with people. We're also going to have you doing bingo.
Yeah, I've never done bingo before.
Bingo.
I'm excited.
I've never done it, but I'm hoping that we can make it really spooky, though.
Yes.
Spooky bingo.
I guarantee you that. If there's one thing I do, I am spooky, but I'm a big believer in making sure everybody has fun being spooky.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
it's going to be all boring and stuff like that.
We are so excited that Jack is going to be there, too. Jack is a good friend of the podcast, and we love him. He knows everything.
Yeah.
The man knows everything.
Yeah. He has his hand in everything.
He does.
He is a very knowledgeable guy.
One other thing we want is people to bring their ghost stories with them. That's one of our favorite things, is for people to come and tell us about all the spooky fun stuff they've seen, experienced, either in the Roff House that day or in the past. That's our favorite. So if you're coming, which I hope you are, please bring your ghost stories. We want to hear them.
Or maybe something that happened on one of your tours. We would love to hear
would
that
be
too.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I got so many stories to tell. It's ridiculous, and we have so many of our return guests who go on our tours. They're coming out there, man. Actually, at least 5 or 6 of them bought tickets to the Roff House. They're like, Neal, I know you're going to show us a good time, and that's what we do. Is I try to make everything very positive. So one of the things I want to talk about Ghostly Podcast real quick is I love that episode of The Conjuring, Pat. Now I know Rebecca, you're the team believer, and a majority of the time when I'm listening to the podcast, I see that I usually want to be on your side. But this time here, man, he brought forth the thunder, boom, and he put it out there, and I was like, man, he made sense. And
every so often.
Every so often. But the one cool thing is just a little bit.
Yeah.
But the one thing I want to definitely make him is definitely team believer at the Roff House. That there is a guarantee. That is my goal. I have a goal in mind, and that is to make Pat a believer at the Roff House. Guaranteed.
Man, that would make my life a lot easier, actually, being a believer. I get a lot of people emailing me about how I'm not a believer and how dare I not be a believer.
Right. And be out there the time that Neal Gibbons made Pat a believer.
If anyone can, you can, Neal.
We could sign like things like of him a picture in front of the Roff House, Team Believer.
Right?
Something like that.
I'd have to get rid of my Team Skeptic shirt then.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, man. So once again, I welcome you guys in, man. I am stoked about this. I'm looking so forward to this. It's going to be unbelievable. But now I want to welcome in John of the Roff House. John, welcome to Spirits by the Graveside. Graveside Paranormal presents Spirits by the Graveside.
Thank
John,
you.
I want to tell you something, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell our audience this, is that I went to your house, me, my wife, Michelle, and Steve, thinking that it's just like a regular ghost hunt. I have to be honest with you. John is one of the most welcoming people to the home of the Roff House. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to this thing, you can either do Airbnb or you could do a ghost hunt. Am I right on that, John?
And a dinner.
And I was going to get to that, John. I was going to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that John makes this charcuterie board for people who are not familiar with the charcuterie board. It's a large board that has some different meats and cheeses and stuff like that and fruit on there. And I love those things. And he put it out for us. And then he makes this large meal for you. Like I had to stop him. I said, dude, I'm going to go to sleep. But the thing is that he made it so welcoming that like I thought it was one of the best experiences that I had going on a ghost hunt was going there. And the thing is, you go outside to the back end of the house where he has an all brick patio, and it's beautiful. And he has like a little waterfall over to my left, if I'm sitting out there, of course. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking up because he's got, how many acres you got? 4 or 5?
5.
5 acres of land.
Wow. And
you look out there and you're just like, wow, this is cool, dude. I was telling him, I go, man, if I knew I was coming, I could bring a case of beer. You know, I would just hang out here eating and drinking all night because the ambiance inside and outside of the house is just great. He rebuilt this house. John, tell us a little bit about the hard work that you put into it.
Well, when I bought Roff Home 16 years ago, it hadn't been lived in for 10 or 15 years, mm-hmm. and no work had been done on it for about 40 years. So imagine letting a home suffer that much neglect, right? It was a wreck, and it required one of two decisions. Either you tear it down and start over, or you put everything you have into it and save it. And I looked at that home and I saw it not only as a place where something very interesting happened, but a place that was very important to people locally. That was a very interesting piece of architecture for the town and for the county. And, you know, I tend to think of the house as a living thing after so many years there. It was something worth saving. It was a thing worth saving. It was like a living thing that needed to be saved. And so I spent years, I would do work on the house when I had money available, or when I had the time and the effort to do it myself, or, there's a lot of like will that has to go into doing that kind of work as well. And so it'd be like lots of activity and then pay off a bunch of bills and then do more activity and pay off more bills. And so it took about 12 to 13 years to get it to the point that it was livable and beautiful, and it was a reflection of what it was again. I had to basically redo everything in the house. The first phase was stop damage from happening. When I bought the house, there were holes in the roof, and when it would rain, the water would just seep down through the walls, seep down through the wood, just seep through the whole house. So imagine that kind of damage going on inside a house. The walls were all plaster and brick. And so when because of all the water damage, I would just reach over and I'd touch a wall, and the plaster would turn to sand and it would just fall off the wall.
Oh, Lord, that's awful.
Exposed brick.
Yeah, that's going to be
the radiators, beautiful old cast iron radiators. Boiler system didn't work. The owner told me, not to expect it to work. So there was no heat in the house. The electrical was 70 years old. Some of it was 70 years old. Some of it was 100 years old. So basically everything had to be ripped out and we had to start over. And it was like just bare bones, right? Everything in the house. Or there were beautiful things with the house, like the beautiful wood floors.
Those floors are phenomenal. Yeah.
And some of them had been covered over with plywood and then linoleum.
Mm-hmm.
And once I would peel that up, then I'd find like 5 layers of, prior varnish and paint and whatever else they would use on the floors back 150 years ago, 120 years ago. I think that plywood was put down about 70, 80 years ago at this point.
And you were telling me that you're the 4th owner within the 100-year period, correct?
Yep. And for all the talk of possession and demons and whatever negative thing people can say about the house, when people buy this house, they hold it until they die. And that's been true for the last 110 years. And now that it's done, now that I've tried to take every piece of it and put it back the way it was, so that when you walk onto the property, you are transported back in time, that you feel what it was like to live as a Victorian in 1868. You feel the weight in a good way of like the architecture of all the old wood, of the wood that was being cut down from virgin forests and turned into homes, of the solidness of real plaster on brick walls. A beautiful story, I think, with the house is that 150 years ago when it was built, all the walls were plastered. And there were 2 families in town that did plastering. So when I went to have the walls replastered, because I wasn't going to put drywall over them, I wanted it done the way it had originally been done. I went to the one guy left in town who plastered, and he was 85. And he came out and he said, well, I'm going to do this as my last project. Wow. I'm going to do this as my last project in my career. And I'm going to do it because it very well may have been my family that first plastered this house 150 years ago. And it would be a great end point in my career to redo a project that my family had once done.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. Mm-hmm. I see, that's what I'm talking about. The positivity that went into what you did. Okay. Because you won the 2020 Illinois Award, correct?
Yep. Landmarks Illinois awarded the house the Restoration Award.
Right, Restoration Award. Mm-hmm. Yep, you won that, and it's the positivity that went into do that because you were bringing something back to life, man. Mm-hmm. And I'm when me and Steve first went there, and I didn't meet you. You remember I called you on the phone? Mm-hmm. I actually fell in love with everything just by looking outside. I ain't lying to anybody, man. Is that I called you like right away. I said, man, this place is amazing. And I fell in love with all the land that was there, the house itself. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, when you come out here, and I know we talk about the word possession, and I know you brought that up again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking that it's something demonic, this isn't for you.
Right.
I'm not saying that you're going to get a teardrop and it's something like that. There are spirits there in this house. I know there is. The reason why I know is because of the evidence that we got. You have the positivity of the day that we're going to have, the positivity of John doing all that rehab to the house. And ladies and gentlemen, the positivity as we talk about through this is actually a very positive story. And that's what I love when I hear these kinds of stories, and I love to build upon them and just put them out to people. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, when you do come out, you are going to speak with spirits. That is a promise. I promise you that. Neal Gibbons' his hand that we will try to find as much evidence as we can for you. I know Pat's going like this. He goes, okay.
No, I can't wait.
I know, man.
I just wish that your remodel had been like a reality show that I could have.
Oh my God! It was a reality show, a very scary reality show.
What was your favorite feature that you remodeled?
It's actually not an original feature. Well, I'd say there's two. There's two features. One is people. I bought the house. The house was painted barn red on the outside. It was painted pink. Everything was painted pink on the inside. And people would say, "What are you going to paint it?" what color are you going to paint? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I am not a creative person that, was born with the creative gene. So I have no idea. So I decided, kind of like the idea that the house is a living thing. And by the way, in an investigation, as an aside, I used to hang out with the people who do investigations at the house, the groups that would come. And this stretches back like a decade. And then for me, it got weird. Like, I have a rule now, which is never investigate your own house.
Understandable.
Right?
Understandable.
And in one of those investigations, they were getting like very intelligent answers back. And we were trying to figure out who it was or what it was. And I asked, are you the house itself? And it answered yes.
Interesting.
And so, for a long time, I felt like I'm like the curator of this house. I'm the caretaker for this house for this time that I'm alive and I own the house. But that the house is like its own entity that exists and lives and breathes. So people would ask me like, okay, well, what color are you going to paint the house? And what color are you going to paint inside? And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. So I decided to let the house speak for itself. And I would scrape down, I treated it like a giant jigsaw puzzle. And I'd scrape down and figure out what is original here. And so something like paint, I would, fortunately, nobody ever did anything to the house except paint over something else or paint or do something over what was already there. So I could just get underneath whatever was on top of something else and say what was originally here. So I scraped under, 7 or 8 layers of paint dating back 150 years. And I would get to the lowest layer of paint. I'd put it in plastic bags, little Ziploc bags, and I'd take it and have the paint analyzed with historic preservation contractors here in Chicago. And they would help me identify the original color scheme of the house.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I'm not a designer, but I was able to recreate the original style and the original color scheme of the house by just letting the house speak for itself. So when you come visit the house and you look at a color on a piece of wood, that's the original color scheme of the house. And in the vast majority of cases, that's where it appeared. And the house kind of feels like a calico cat, where you've got, these deep reds in one room and then these deep golds in another room, and then these deep greens in another room, and then 2 shades of tan that go through the house. And it's just this really earthy, colorful Victorian color scheme. So that was one of my, I guess that's one of my favorite things about the house, is just letting that color scheme, letting that original detail come back out. And then the other, it's not original, but it was an addition from a woman who lived in the house in the 1940s and 1950s. And I have a great deal of respect for her. She was, her name was Katherine Clifton. And she, at the age of 40 or 42, something like that, inherited farmland that comprised of 36 farms. And it was about the size of Rhode Island.
Wow.
So imagine being, essentially, she was married, but she just married. So basically she was this independent woman who in 1940, who came into a huge amount of property, of land and wealth. And she had to figure out in 1940 how to manage 36 farms with 36 men running those 36 farms and not be taken advantage of, make sure that they were worked the way that she would want them to be worked, and to maximize the efficiency of those farms. And she did that in a very creative way of, I think, a very literal way of overseeing. She bought an airplane. She learned how to fly. She built herself a hangar on the back part of the property. And every morning she would get up and she would fly over the property, all of her farms, and she would take notes on what needed to be done. She'd make sure people weren't lying to her. She would make sure she wasn't being taken advantage of. And she would make sure that they were being run the way that she wanted them to be run. And she would come back and she would take her notes, and she had a hired guy she would send out to deliver the notes to everybody. And, she managed her shit, as it were.
Basically. And the thing is that there was a lot of different characters who were inside the house besides Mary Roth. You had a judge who was inside the house. He got in trouble with some things. And then she was an owner of the house. So you've had a lot of back storylines of, and I don't know if I'm using the right word, character correctly, but they had strong storylines in their lives, and those leave impressions inside that home as well. So it's not just the story of Mary Roth, but just so that we understand, John, because you told me Mary Roth did not grow up in the Roff House.
Correct.
She grew up about 3 or 4 blocks down, where like there's like a Menards or something like that, or a hardware store down the block.
An AutoZone. There's an AutoZone like warehouse.
Yeah. The house was built after her death. So that brings us into the story of the Watseka Wonder. Now, when she was only 6 months of age, Asa and Dorothy started noticing different things about her. Can you tell us a little about that, John?
Yeah, so from essentially the time she was born, like you said, from about 6 months onward, she started exhibiting strange behavior. And, I've been around a few people and a handful of people in my life because I work in higher education. And so there'll be people on campus who have epileptic seizures, right? So I've seen several people have seizures. And to me, the way it's described in the story, it sounds like she's having a seizure in the beginning part of her life. And these things, so something like a seizure, something that seems like a seizure is happening from the time she's 6 months old until the time she dies, when she's 18 years old. However, in the beginning, it happens once every few months. And then as she grows older, she's a few years of age, then it begins happening once a month, and then it becomes once multiple times a month, and then once a week, and then multiple times a week, just increasingly bad, right? Increasingly worse. And her parents, imagine being in the middle of rural Illinois in 1855, and having a medical problem, psychological problem, spiritual problem, like however you want to think about this. Imagine having a problem like this and being in the middle of nowhere in 1855.
Yeah, with no cars, no,
You got a horse, and nobody within any distance of that horse will be able to help you.
Wow.
And so her parents took her to any doctor they could take her to who would see her. They tried religious options, they tried medical options. They took her to an asylum at one point, and she was in an asylum in Peoria for a time. Any treatment they could take her to that they thought could help, they did. And so, but what happened? I mean, nothing good happened. It did not help her.
And so she, at the age of 18 years of age, she was put in the asylum. Now, I believe, psychiatry was actually still in its infancy, okay? I believe that, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, you guys give me your own opinion if you wish. I believe there actually is a fine line between a psychiatric problem as well as some kind of possession or speaking with spirits. That's my opinion. I've worked in the realm of dealing with psych patients before, and we'll get into how Mary Roth would cut herself. Sometimes it is, I've met people who do that. It's to alleviate some kind of pain that is going on, some kind of distress that is going on in their lives, as well as she would also take leeches and place them on her forehead for bloodletting. That was something that was thought in the realm of psychiatry, if I'm right on that, John. And people believe that. So that's why I say that is very much in the infancy of that. Whereas you're doing some extreme stuff by putting leeches on your temples and stuff like that. And when she was put in the institution, in the Peoria institution, if you look back at some of these pictures, it's unbelievable, where they would put them inside these baths. And inside the baths, they would put them in there for like hours in a cold one. And then all of a sudden think by putting them inside of a hot one, all of a sudden they're all of a sudden going to change. The only thing I'd be getting is going, oh my God, why do I have to deal with this cruel bastard? That's all I'd be getting from something like that.
Well, in naturopathic treatments and stuff like that, they do a cold hot bath like that too.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of it once, and it was definitely something very jarring to your system.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, it is freezing cold, and then all of a sudden you're just so hot you feel like you're burning up.
Yeah, it's almost where you want to pass out almost.
Absolutely.
And then they would put them inside these small cages. And ladies and gentlemen, when I say small cages, I mean something like a coffin, and lock them away for days upon days, if not months. And they would put these boxes over their head to keep them not looking around or anything like that. I forget the word that I want to use, but they would do all these things in there. But I do believe there is a fine line between some kind of possession sometimes, or in psychiatry of what is wrong with someone. But once again, that's my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Well, I have
Go ahead.
I have a rule with the house from 16 years of owning it, and it's don't be of weakened mind or spirit at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about someone like Mary Roff, I see someone, let's say it did start off as epilepsy, and it was something medically explainable today.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, if that's happening more and more frequently, it's going to weaken your spirit.
Yes.
And then once you're of a weakened spirit, then what can take advantage of that? And, you can see, I can think of examples of that, of how it would play out in a human world among humans. But then couldn't that also be possible with a spirit world and this kind of intangible world that we might be able to interact with, or that can interact with us? And so, toward the end of her life, in the last few years, she began to show signs of not just of having something like a seizure, but she would go into clairvoyant states, and she could read envelopes that were closed. She could read books that were closed. She could, she would seem to be talking to things that weren't there. That maybe that's a hallucination, maybe it's something more, but especially the clairvoyance, like that's not explainable as something medical or as something that's epilepsy. And so I'm left wondering whether, whatever was going wrong with her, if it was so bad that it allowed something else to come in and take advantage.
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca. You were going to say.
Oh no, that I was actually going to ask about that, because I remember reading that there were some things that she did that were more unexplainable, I guess is the way to say. But I like your explanation. I think that, or at least as a potential explanation for what happened, because there did seem to be a change in her at a certain point. And then, I guess, was the sending her to the asylum just a last ditch effort to try to help her because things were getting so bad, or?
Well, so she died in 1865. There's a census document that someone gave me from Peoria for the census of 1860, and it shows a Mary E. Roff in residence at an address in Peoria that has many other names listed against it. So imagine an asylum in 1860 in Peoria, which wouldn't have been Bartonsville, because Bartonsville was, I think, built in like the 1880s. But, it was probably like a big boarding house kind of style, or, a large building, but not as big as like the later institutions. And, she might have been she could have been in residence there then, right? So it wouldn't have been so much at the end of her life, but maybe more ongoing. There's references in the story that sound like maybe she went back and forth, or that she was there for many months and then it came back, and so it was more like a treatment that she underwent. So it's not really clear to me like exactly how much time she spent there, but I think it was more ongoing than it was just at the end.
John, do you know if she actually died in the house? Because there is some discrepancy that she died at the asylum or that she died at the house.
I think that it is ambiguous, that when I read the last lines of her story, it says that she came downstairs, she ate some breakfast, I think it was toast and a tea, and went back upstairs. There was a scream that was heard. People ran upstairs, and they found her splayed across the bed and dead. Now, that could have taken place in something that's more institutional, like kind of a boarding house that's serving as an asylum. and it could have taken place at her home with her family. It doesn't say, and Mr. and Mrs. Roff ran upstairs and found her, right? So I'm left wondering. I'm left as with, with it being unclear.
Okay.
When she died.
Not that I think it matters much, for the overall story, but it's just kind of interesting that we can't put a place to her death. So,
Well, and I agree with you completely, John. And I talk about this a lot of times. Is when we let our defenses down, either through drugs, alcohol, or depression, like that. We do welcome in these things. I know because I've seen these cases before, and you're absolutely right about that. You could be broken down. You have your forms of possession where eventually you get oppression, and you're getting broken down, and then that leads to something very negative in someone's life. So yeah, that good point. Very good point brought up. Before the 100 days came and Lorenzi was going to come back to her body, do you know if the Roff family had any closure, you think?
Yeah, so there's two phases to this story. There's first the, Mary Roff and her tragic life, and that took place in obscurity, really, right? It's this one family just dealing with it. And so Mary dies in 1865. The same month that she dies, they buy the property, 80 acres, so where the house would be built, and then they're going to farm the rest of it or rent it out to be farmed. And over the next 2 or 3 years, they build this house, Roff, what I call Roff Home. I don't know exactly when, but at some point they convert to spiritualism, and because they believe that what they saw with their daughter had more than just a medical explanation, that had as reasons for it, right? And they believe that they saw through their daughter that she had a spiritual illness and not a medical illness. And they thought they over time found the answers with spiritualism. So for 10 years in this house, they practice spiritualism. They try and communicate with their dead daughter. They work with mediums. A lot of it in the front room. Like when you come into the front room of the house, you enter the house, this is where this all happened, right? That they spent so many years basically doing the work of, like ghost hunters, right? Like same things that ghost hunters come in and do now. I look at the house as being like that. It's like a monument to spiritualism, and it's a monument to the kind of work that ghost hunters do, right? Trying to find out, is there something else I can talk to? Is there something else on another side? And so they kept kind of poking that veil for 10 years until finally something responded. And it responded in the form of Lorenzi Venom, who was a girl across town who was born 2 years before Mary Roff died. By the time this happened in 1877, 1878, she was 13 years old. And for 7 months, she went through something like what Mary Roff had gone through. But I would say worse, right? She'd go into these catatonic states. She would take on different personalities. She was generally violent. Her parents, they would keep her locked in her room, tie her to her bed. They would take her to doctors like the Roffs did with their daughter, and of course nobody could help her. Religious and people in town started rising up against her, saying whatever's going on with this girl isn't good, can't be angelic, we need to get her out of town. And the parents were going to send her away and send her to an asylum to live out the rest of her life there. And the Roff family, they heard about what was going on, and they said, if we'd only known then what we know now through spiritualism, we could have helped our daughter Mary avoid her fate. And shouldn't we intervene in this case and try to help this girl, Lorenzi, with whatever's going on with her? So they make an appointment and they go and visit the Venoms. And it happens to be Mr. Roff and a spiritualist doctor who they've called to town. And while they're there visiting with the Venoms, Lorenzi comes downstairs and takes on 3 different personalities. And the first 2 kind of come across to me like cranky old people.
Right.
It's not like evil and demonic, but it's like, I don't know, somebody cranky and old has died, and then that's like kind of the expression that comes through when they talk to her. And but then the third that comes through says that she's Mary Roff, and starts asking all these, questions of the family of Mr. Roff. How's everybody in the family? How's Ma? How's Nervy, my sister? How's everyone doing? And I've missed you so much, and I've seen you trying to communicate with me at the house, and I'm just so thrilled to be able to talk to you today. And by the way, let me tell you what's going on with this girl. This girl is very ill, and the angels in heaven have taken her soul up to heaven to be cleansed. And while she's here with no soul, anything can pour into it. And usually something cranky or evil will be what will happen. So that's actually the point at which this 100-day story of possession begins for Lorancy Venom and Mary Roff. She says that the angels in heaven want her to remain in this body until Lorancy's healing is complete. And in this way, she could protect her from whatever else might pour into her. And so she makes this argument to this goes on for like a week, right? Like the Roffs are there for one evening, and they think that, well, some other personality is going to come in tomorrow. Something else is going to just take over after that. But Mary Roff never goes away. It's days later, and it's still Mary Roff, and she's saying, I don't know you people, and I want to go home and be with my family. And so the parents say, well, this is the most normal she's acted in months, in 7 or 8 months. And even though it's a different personality, not being violent, we don't have to keep her in her room or tie her to her bed. So if it would help her to go over to the Roff house, why not? Let her go stay there for a while, because we were about to send her to an asylum.
Yeah, which would really been the same thing. And one of the things is that we were talking about cutting, because Mary Roff was a cutter. One of the things that she said when she came into the body of Lorancy Venom, these are not my arms. This is not my arm. She said, my arm's over in the grave. So it's very odd how, like, all of a sudden the spirit of another girl comes inside, ladies and gentlemen, and she's recognizing people, giving out names and nicknames of people that Lorancy Venom never knew. Understand, this is in the 1800s. We didn't have iPhones and all this stuff, even though they were actually only blocks away from each other. Am I correct on that, John? The Venom House and Roff House are only like maybe 6 blocks away.
Well, it's a small town. It was more small town to the other. It was probably like 10 blocks. But
10 blocks. Sorry. And so you have this, and it's just such an amazing story right off the bat that this lady is recognizing people and talking about people's family issues and this and that. But continue on, John. I just wanted to put that in there. Continue on with Lorancy Venom going to the Roff house, please.
Yeah. And so the Roffs are more than happy to oblige, and they welcome home this girl, Lorancy Venom, who's claiming to be their dead daughter. And they welcome her into the home. She stays with them for, in the beginning, she says, the angels in heaven will only let me stay here until sometime in the spring. And then Lorancy is going to have to come back to take over her body again and live out the rest of her life. And so she warns them up front, right? This isn't forever. And but in the meantime, I want to spend that time with my family, and they want to spend that time with me. And so imagine being the Roffs, and you had a daughter that was very, very ill her entire life, and not just ill lying in bed ill, but like violently ill. And, like Neal has said, a cutter, and bleeding herself with leeches and cutting herself with a knife. Imagine how traumatic that must have been. And then all of a sudden, and then she dies violently in the middle of one of these seizures or episodes or fits or whatever you want to call it. Now you have the chance to live with this girl again, albeit through another girl's body, in a state of perfect physical and mental health. And how joyous that must have been for them. And cleansing and healing and like liberating probably as well. So she moves in and she spends 100 days there. And, you could say, well, was this a hoax? Was somebody just feeding her information? Because that's a theory about this whole story. She was in love with the brother in the family, and the brother was feeding her the information. I mean, that could be true, right? Like somebody would say, well, if you're really Mary Roff, then tell us what, we did together at Easter in 1858. Or if you're really Mary Roff, then, give me these details. So if you have somebody feeding you information, it could be possible that they could feed you the right information and you'd have it. It's like just memorizing facts.
Sure.
But then, there were cases where there'd be kind of these mystical experiences that would go on where this woman came over and she said, if you're really Mary Roff, then you knew everyone in my family when we were growing up in the 1850s together. And if you're really Mary Roff, then you're dead and you have access to heaven and you can tell me everyone in my family who's died. And so the girl says, well, there's this person and this person and this person, names off several people. And then there's one last name at the end. And the woman says, you're right for everyone except one. And that last person you named is someone who's never existed in my family. And so therefore, this must be a hoax. Someone's feeding you information, and you just screwed this up. And Laurency says, or Mary says, well, the angels in heaven are telling me that was indeed someone in your family, and is a spirit in child form. So the woman, walks off in a huff and says, oh, I've discovered her. This is a hoax, and goes home and tells her family. And one of the daughters says, well, Mom, at one point I was pregnant and I miscarried. Mm. And it was so upsetting to my husband and myself that we chose not to tell anyone. But the name that Mary Roff gave you was the name we were going to give the child.
Wow. And wow, that's crazy. And that's the thing is, how would she get any kind of information, even on those 5 names? It's a random question. Mm-hmm. You would have to go back to that person and say, hey, this person just asked me. Now give me his names real quick. It doesn't work like that. You would have to sit down with hours upon hours, and you're not even going to know who's going to walk up to you and ask you these questions.
And you're 13. Yeah. And you're 13.
Yeah. And your attention span. Come on.
Yeah. So there were those kinds of things that happened at the house that I think really make this kind of this mystical experience, right? It's more than just somebody played a hoax on people and was memorizing information. No, like she appeared to have this connection like a medium, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a theory with this story that I like that resonates with me, which is what happened to Laurency Venom is that she was born into a family where the female members had very strong mediumship abilities. And that what happened with her when she was hitting puberty is that she was coming into those abilities. Mm. Right. And they were so strong that she couldn't control them. So through the intervention of Mary Roff and the angels in heaven, as they put it in the story, she was able to come to control these abilities and then go on to live out the rest of her life. And so in this story of, naming the family members and then, naming an unborn child that had miscarried, it's like evidence of that, right? Of like this mediumship that was going on. And so I see the story as this very touching story of 2 families, mm-hmm. Where one had suffered a tragedy that played out over 18 years and then sought spiritual answers for that tragedy. And then had the opportunity not only to heal themselves by being of service to other people, mm-hmm. To this other family and to this girl, but also then of this other girl who was very sick and had the chance to be healed herself through their help.
And I really like that theory. Right. That's really, really interesting idea mm-hmm. and concept. I know that there were seances that were done in the home. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us anything about any of them? Like, what were they like?
With the Roffs, you mean?
Yes.
Or, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've done seances since then, and yikes.
Wow.
So with the Roffs, yeah, they would have prominent people come over from the town and the county because, of course, you've got this circus playing out in your house of this possessed girl staying in your house, and of course everybody wants to have a piece of it. So prominent people would come over. They would host like dinners, and then they would do seances. And in these seances, Lorancy then would, like Mary Roff would leave her body, and other spirits would come in. There was one episode where Lorancy's spirit, or Mary Roff's spirit, bounced from person to person around the table.
Really?
So basically went possessing each person around, in the seance. I would go through the story and I'd say, okay, what room did this happen in? This element of the story happened in. And I'd look for clues, right? And so during one of these seances, she gets possessed by this, or channels this spirit. I think I like the term channeling more than I do possession.
Sure.
There's a medium I know, and I hesitate calling somebody a medium unless I've really had experience with them and they really convinced me. There's one person I know as a medium who channels, and it's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. And so the story reminds me of that. Like, you just start channeling somebody else's personality, just channeling that person, right? Like they're possessing you, but I think channeling is a nicer word.
Yeah, because you're welcoming them in. So yeah, channeling.
Yeah. And so it's like an old woman who gets some like a knitting basket and starts to knit, and she starts commenting on the unique windows in this room. And I'm like, oh, that has to be the front room because it's got these floor to ceiling windows with the arched point to them, and very dramatic. And like, okay, this had to be here in this front room with these windows. So there's kind of like some mundane things that happen, like the woman just starts knitting, right? And there's other strange things that happen, like Mary Roff's spirit bouncing from person to person in a seance. So
wow,
that is wild. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, do you have any questions for John at all?
Oh goodness, so many questions. Actually, you know what? One, you mentioned the story, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear this. Like, how do we know? I mean, you've talked a little bit about some of the research you've done as far as looking at census records and all of that. But kind of what's like isn't there like a book or something that was written where we get a lot of this material?
Yes, everything traces back to a pamphlet, or it was actually published in a journal in Chicago. And so, when they went through the story and they saw what was happening, the Roffs, and it's called the Watseka Wonder. So if people Google the Watseka Wonder PDF, Watseka Wonder, there you go. That's the original version of it.
Yeah.
And it was an article that appeared in a journal. I think it was called like the Psychosociological Journal or Psychospiritual Journal or something like that, out of Chicago. It was published 1 year after this story took place. And the Roffs were, they basically believed that what they saw happening in their home was evidence of what they believed as spiritualists. And so they wanted to document it so they could prove to the world that spiritualism was a correct view of the world.
Right. And the guy who wrote the book, he was a hypnotist.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
At least that's what I read. John, did you ever hear that before?
I've just heard him referred to as a spiritualist doctor.
Okay, because I thought I read somewhere that he did hypnotize Lorancy. Am I correct?
That could be true.
I thought I read that.
I'm sure there was someone that did it at some point. If it
I thought it was him when Asa Roff brought Mr. Stevens into the house. Originally, he was trying to hypnotize her. At least that's what I read. And that's what was bringing out some, sound like that older lady that you were talking about. She was actually kind of vulgar about something. And Steve always gets a kick out of what's being said. You'll probably hear him giggle in the background right now. But the thing is that he was a hypnotist, and he was trying to hypnotize her to speak with whatever was inside of her, which is having Steve, by the way, is a hypnotist as well. And I don't know if he'll try to do that on the day off. We never know. But I just thought I'd bring that up. What about you, Pat? Do you have any other questions for John?
Yeah, while listening to you, John, I'm fascinated by the story. I'm fascinated about you as well.
Thank you.
What made you want to purchase this home? And like, I know that it's it's purely good reasons, but I just, what was that driving factor like?
Uh, well, back in 2005, I had moved back to Watseka. My father had fallen ill, and so I wanted to help take care of him. And I'd always had this dream of owning an old Victorian. Not always. For a long time, I'd had this dream of owning an old Victorian. And I thought, well, this will be easier to do in a place like Watseka than in a place like New York City, which is where I moved from.
Oh yeah.
And I also thought, I've never been able to convince myself one way or another of whether, is Christianity correct? Is there a heaven or a hell? Is Buddhism correct? Is there anything more than this tangible world? Why should I couldn't convince myself I should be an atheist, and I couldn't convince myself that I should be this firm believer. And I thought, well, what better way to figure out if there's something more in this world than to buy an old house that's supposed to be a haunted house?
Well, you're definitely going to find out something.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, if this doesn't convince me one way or the other, I don't know what will. So that was also like part of it. And also I wanted to save this old piece of architecture, and I was really kind of fascinated by it. And I had this
It's a beautiful house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I have this view of in town, like in these small towns, not just Watseka, but in small towns in general, old buildings, unless there's a concerted effort to save them, they either burn down, fall down, or get torn down. Right. And I saw this as, the house as in that same trajectory, either falling down or getting torn down, especially. And so I approached the owners and, talked to them about whether they had a desire to sell the house. And they were like, yes, absolutely, sign here. And because they wanted to be rid of this house that needed so much work and nobody wanted to buy it. And so that's how I ended up with this house. It wasn't really planned, and that my life would take this direction, but that's where I'm at. So.
Well, I could tell by the background tapestry that you have that you definitely found a path in some kind of spirituality. So I really appreciate that.
Well, and I think that the house has definitely convinced me. I'm not agnostic. The house has convinced me that there is more to this life than what we can touch through, than what we can see and what we can touch and hear in this physical world. And I think that we have to have a lot of respect for what may be.
Right. No, yeah. Totally agreeing with that. Totally. Can you tell us a personalized story of anything that ever happened inside the house, John? Of a paranormal one?
Yeah. Okay. I could tell a couple of different stories. I'll tell one that is directly from me, right? So it's not like, oh, well, this person told me this, but or there's some investigation, but this is like directly from my own experience. And I love the stories where things come from different directions, right? So it's not just like, oh, I got this recording, but that there was a recording, and then there was a medium, and then there was something else, and they all kind of came together from different directions. You say, well, how do you debate that? And so this woman I know who's a medium, she plays into this story. So back in, I don't know, it was like 7 years ago, I went through a sudden breakup. I was the one who was broken up with, and it happened on February 13th, unexpectedly.
Oh my God.
Great timing, right?
Holidays, right?
That's when you bought all your chocolates.
Yeah. And at the time it happened, it didn't really like fully sink in. It was, it was going to be Valentine's Day. And so at the time I was working, in Chicago, and then I'd come back to Watseka on the weekends and go back and forth. So that weekend I said, well, okay, since I'm going to be alone this weekend, I'll rent a sander, because I was kind of doing a major project at the house at the time. I'll rent this sander and I'll go and I'll sand floors. And so I go through Kankakee, I get this sander. Of course, those big orbital sanders weigh just a ton, right? They're just huge. And
Oh yeah.
And then it had snowed. It had snowed like, I don't know, like a foot and a half. One of those Februaries where it was just really cold and polar vortexes and blizzards and everything else. And so it was kind of a treacherous line drive back to the house from Kankakee with the sander. And I get to the house and I pull in the driveway and I look up at the house from the end of the driveway. And then it hits me. It is Valentine's Day weekend and I am alone. And I burst into tears in the driveway. And because then it finally sinks in. So I get through that. Of course, when I say the driveway, I'm at the end of the driveway that, it's like 100 feet up to the house and it's snowed a foot and a half. So I have to drag the sander through the snow up to the house. I get it in there. I take all the furniture from one side of the house. I move it to the other side of the house, upstairs and downstairs. And I just spend the weekend sanding back and forth and back and forth. And each room, I do about 6 hours in each room, sanding and sanding and sanding until I get under 150 years of dirt that was ground into the grains in the wood. And about midnight on Saturday, and I'm alone with my thoughts, right? Because it's just sanding and thinking and sanding and thinking. And about midnight on Saturday night, I just drop everything and I'm in this archway between the front parlor and the rear parlor. And I look up into the ether of the air of the house. And I say, Katherine, that woman from the 1940s who owned the house. And I say, Katherine, you had all the money in the world when you did your renovation of the house, the last person who did the renovation of the house. And you could do whatever you wanted, paint the house pink, paint the house barn red, buy a plane, fly all over your property. You could do this. I can't. I don't know how I'm ever going to finish this house. I don't know how ever I'm going to find the money to do it and make it work and make it happen. Your reality show, when you think about, you say, oh, this would be a reality show.
I can picture all of this.
Yeah. So this is like, a dramatic moment in the reality show of me owning this house. And I say, you were able to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And beyond that, whenever, no offense to all of you or anybody listening, but I thought whenever anybody comes to this house, it's because of the story. Nobody comes here to know me. They just want to know the story. And I'm sick of the story. It's like a ball and chain around my neck. And I've just had it. I don't know how I'm going to do this with this house anymore. And so I vented. I got it off my chest. It spoke into the ether. And I pick up the sander again and I start sanding and sand and sand and sand. The next day, it's Sunday. I continue sanding. About, 7 o'clock that night or so, I lay down and I take a nap. And at 8, I wake up and I roll over. And as soon as I wake up and roll over, my phone dings with a text message. And it's the medium, who lives about half an hour away. And she says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" And keep in mind, I don't go on social media and talk about my personal life really. And I don't, and at that time I didn't, and I didn't go on talking about like a breakup or anything like that. So she says like, "Well, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" And she says, "Well, Katherine's here." And she's been here for about a half an hour and she refuses to leave until I give you a message. And that message is, she knows you feel sad. She knows you feel alone, but she wants you to know you're more than just the house.
Wow. That is amazing, man.
Wow.
That just goes to show you, like you said in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
it's the spirit of the house,
Mm-hmm.
And it's drawn in all these different things. And when your emotions are brought out into that,
Mhm.
You know, man, I like that story, John. That's a good story. I dig it.
It is and I say, okay, if she's a fake, how do you explain that?
Exactly.
Wow.
You know, can I tell? I love your story. But can I tell one little story?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's my show. All right.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is what's amazing, and I go to there. I called John. I said, "Hey, listen, I got to go to Watseka. I got to drop off some posters and this and that." And he says, "All right, go ahead, do whatever the hell you do, Neal." And and so I'm going there, and it's time for me to leave. I hit my GPS. I swear my hand to God on this. I even told him this. I put my GPS on to go to my home, and it's sending me in a different direction, but I wasn't paying attention, and I'm in front of the Roff House. So I'm like, all right, maybe something weird, all right? Because I originally set my thing for Roff House, okay? So then I go back into my GPS, and this has never happened before. I type in my address, and I start heading out. It reroutes me back to the Roff House. Now it happened the third time, and I call him, and I sent him a message. I said, man, this is freaking weird, man. I had to wait till I got out of the city limits before I could put that in. My hand got on that. It was
Wow, you just couldn't get away, huh?
I'm like, what is this? I go, this is
Wow.
weird. There is something definitely going on there. And what we want to do right now is we want to show you the evidence. First off, I want to make sure everybody kind of puts on some headphones. In the beginning video, you're going to be listening to the beginning because you're going to hear a lady's voice. I believe that she was following us around in the, on the second floor. I think most activity we're getting is definitely on that second floor. And then the Anahata, and I'm going to leave it for each and every one of you to decide, was coming up with names that are familiar to the home. See, like I told John in the beginning, I said, what sounds like sometimes that you cannot decipher, but when you go through all the evidence, and I tell a lot of people this, you might walk away from a haunting or something like that, but when you go through a lot of the evidence, that's when you pick up things that you're like, I can't believe that was going on while I was standing there. And then the second thing is going to be EVPs. So please put on your headphones. Steve, if you're ready, roll it.
There it is. Yeah.
Wow. Right on the lamp.
It's right on the lamp.
It's always right on the lamp.
And then if you look at the other lamp, come back a little. Center it. There it is.
Are you moving?
Do you
Or
raise
are
your
there-
hand?
Are there two of you in here?
Do you raise your hand? Leg.
Leg. That's all right.
See, that's in the mirror.
That might be Michelle.
I'm right here.
Michelle, come on.
Yeah, I'm right
Whatever it
here.
is, it's
I'm over
boogieing
there.
down. Michelle, stay right behind Sue. This is coming from the mirror now, guys. Are you in that mirror? No, this is wood. Can you do that again? Nobody moves. There it is. Showing up in the mirror. Doing some kind of dance.
Now it's dancing for you.
Imitating my dance moves. There you go, boogie down.
So we're looking over to the right side. This is what it looks like in the black and white. You see the lamp right there. That's actually a mirror right there. For whatever reason, this is coming out of the mirror.
Who's here?
Probably close that bathroom window.
Who's here? That's Suzette. What's my name?
You keep hearing Venom in the background.
Are you saying Venom? Are you saying Lorenzi's name? can tell us your story.
What two spirits, what's your names? They're near these lamps.
That's my sister.
It's my sister.
Tell him.
Wait. Dog.
Good. That's very good.
Can any spirits in this room come forward to us and speak with us at this time? My name's Neal. What is yours? Asa?
So that's the first video. What's odd about it is how the name Asa keeps coming up. The name Asa keeps coming up. The name Venom keeps coming up. It's hard to hear that first disembodied voice in the front. I know it is. It's just I can hear things. Oh, and I was telling Pat earlier, I hear them in my left ear, and it's always my left ear. And Steve will tell you, he goes, "How do you hear these things?" I hear voices when I go into certain places, and I pick up on certain things. Now the next video is the last video. Some pretty good EVPs. Steve, roll it.
The first possession in America, documented possession in America. And for 100 days, the first possession in America, documented possession in America. And for 100 days.
Mary Roff, did you enjoy your life while you were alive? Despite all the craziness that happened. You're looking at that picture. Mary Roff, did you enjoy your life while you were alive? Despite all the craziness that happened. You're looking at that picture.
You make that go red for us. You make that go red for us.
Show that you're stepping up the valve. Show that you're stepping up the valve. Another one on that side, going on this side. Another one on that side, going on this side.
So what do you guys think of what you just seen? Is that pretty good?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Team believer already?
Not quite. Not quite there.
Being nice. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and when we're talking about the mirrors and stuff like that, it's a thing called psychomantium. Psychomantium is a thing where people try to conjure things through mirrors. We've had it at different places like Whispers Estates, where people put up mirrors throughout the house, believing that spirits will come through the mirrors, back and forth through mirrors. What's odd about it is that figure was showing up, or at least the anomaly of an SLS. And then around that same time, you hear clearly, I'm sure everybody did hear that, "Take me to the mirror."
Yeah, that was the spookiest thing for me.
Yeah.
Or just the one that I heard the most, I guess.
So, yeah, I when I was listening to those, I was like, man, we caught some good stuff. And here's the thing is, that's not all the evidence we caught, guys. And like I tell a lot of people is, you'll sometimes walk away from places and go, I don't feel like I got anything. It's nothing. And then when you go through all the evidence, that's when you start going, wow, I didn't know that was going on when that was happening. And it's an amazing thing that happened. Pat or Rebecca, do you have any more questions before we end this interview?
You know, the only other question I had was, why do you think, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but do you think there's something about the house that maybe draws investigators or those interested in the paranormal to it? I mean, I know, I guess if it has a reputation, but I just wondered, the house itself, does it we were talking about it kind of being its own entity. Does it enjoy having people in it doing the seances and doing the investigations, do we think?
I feel like I think the answer is yes. And I feel like the character of the house has changed to a degree over time, right? Like when I bought the house and was first doing work on the house, in the first few months, I got the sense I was being watched a lot at the house, right? Like watched and observed, kind of like, well, who is this person we've never seen before? And, when groups started going through the house, and I mean, I literally could not be on the lawn without somebody wanting to see the house when I first got the house.
Wow.
And it's a story that I think, even though it's 140 years old, the story sits in people's imaginations and like takes up this piece of, what did the Roffs do? The Roffs wanted to know if they could communicate with their daughter. They wanted answers for what had gone on in this life. And what do ghost hunters do when they come to the house? They seek answers for whether there's something beyond this world, or, like there was a medium that Rick Hayes, who did an event at the house last weekend, and people come looking to connect with their loved ones who've passed away, to get answers for things that happened in this life. And I think that the house is like a vehicle, like a medium in and of itself for that. And it's almost like it's the nature of the house, or the house was created with that purpose. And since the renovation work has, it turned a point where most of the, like, let's say 70% of the work was done. It looked like a house again. It looked like the way it looked 150 years ago. From around that point onward, it feels like the house has taken on a different character. Like it's returned to, because it went through a phase where it was much more negative 10 years ago. And I think that, whether it's ghost hunting or life in general, I think we have to cultivate the kind of energy we want in our lives. And Neal has mentioned several times about like staying positive or cultivating positive energy or seeking that out. And I think it's the same thing with the house, like that story with Katherine, right? I mean, that's a very positive story. And I think that, over time, that kind of energy is what's come to inhabit the house more than let's say negative energy. The energy of a house that's broken down and neglected and abused and left to rot and decay, right? And now it's returned with vitality and spirit and a new life. And so I think, it's a beautiful house. It's been, I'll just say, beautifully restored. Pat myself on the back for that.
No, go ahead.
But it is a beautiful house. And so I'm glad that I've been able to return it to its prior state. It's on a beautiful piece of property. It's retained that character of being this homestead from the 19th century. The oak trees to the west of the house are, they were planted when the Roffs probably planted them. So it's just got this old Victorian character. And people come there now to celebrate birthdays, celebrate anniversaries, just to spend like romantic weekends outside of the city. And to reconnect with themselves. Like when I'm there, I can go outside at night and look up and see the Milky Way. There's animals all around me of just being out in the countryside. And I just feel like connected with the earth and more connected with myself. And I think that's what the house gives to people. And then also, connected with a more spiritual world.
Right. And we want people to come out and experience that kind of feeling. And now if I could, I'd like to just finalize what I think is going on. I think there is a spiritual miracle that happened, and I think it happened to more than just one person. I think it happened to more than just Lorancy Venom. I think that Lorancy Venom, yes, the miracle happened with her, that she was able to come back after 100 days and live a long life, and she died in California and lived a long life. Mary Roff, Asa Roff, Dorothy Roff, could they have had a moment where they found forgiveness? And sometimes that forgiveness that's inside that we want to have, it does us all well for our soul. And the moment that we're able to do that, we're able to share that with a whole lot of people. And that's one of the things we want to do on the 18th, 23 days away, is that we want to share something like that. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, possession is not just dealing with demons, and this ain't for you if that's what you're thinking. It's about spiritual healing. And the thing is, also, Asa Roff, yes, was a spiritualist. And like John said, this house is alive. this house is alive and there's positive energy, and all of a sudden we bring in all that positive energy, you'll get in what you put in, and you'll get out what is you're going to be able to probably catch on some of the evidence. And so I want to thank John for coming on tonight. I really do appreciate it. Ghostly Podcast, Pat and Rebecca for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Man, this was a great show tonight. I was looking so forward to this all day long. I was swimming around my pool going, man, I hope I don't mess this up. So once again, John, thanks for coming on. Pat and Rebecca, thanks for coming on. And ladies and gentlemen, like always, boom.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you.